Pretend you love me for 10 minutes. The words hit like a drumbeat in a storm, sharp and desperate. Rain streaked across the cafe's wide windows, paparazzi lights flashing like jagged lightning behind them. Inside, everything smelled of cinnamon and steamed milk, warmth holding its fragile ground against the chaos outside. The CEO, who had just burst through the door, stood breathless, drenched eyes darting like a hunted animal. And across from her, Dean Walker, a single father and janitor turned barista, froze with a towel still in his hand. Follow my story to the end and comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. The cafe was always quiet at that hour. The low hum of conversation wrapped around the hiss of the espresso machine. Dean liked it that way. After his afternoon shift cleaning offices, he came here for the evening hours' steady work that let him keep Ethan close while finishing homework at a corner booth. But tonight's stillness shattered. The woman who stormed in looked nothing like the regulars. Her pencil-slim coat clung to her frame, hair pinned with surgical precision, now loosened by the rain lashes glittering with drops like sparks. Behind her, flashes blazed through umbrellas as paparazzi pressed against the glass. 10 minutes, she repeated, voice breaking with adrenaline. That's all I need. Pretend you're with me, please. Dean blinked, the towel heavy in his hands. That's oddly specific, because I only need 10 for them to get bored, she answered, glancing over her shoulder at the mob outside. And because I don't make a habit of lying longer than necessary. From the corner booth, a small voice piped up. Dad Ethan's pencil hovered over fractions, his big eyes cutting from the strange woman to the window where cameras winked like fireflies gone rabid. Are we in trouble? Dean managed a smile for his boy, the kind meant to steady a kite against a gust. Not today, champ. He dropped the towel, checked the clock, 5:42 p.m., and the framed sign above the counter that said, House Policy. No drama, just coffee. Then his gaze returned to the woman, recognition dawning. Juliana Cross. He'd seen her face 100 times on magazines, at the grocery checkout, on television clips that made her sound colder than marble. A self-made billionaire CEO of Heartline International. A woman with a spine that cut steel and rumors she had never ordered but could never silence. Dean's jaw worked. He looked from her to Ethan, then back. Ground rules, he said finally. Her breath hitched. What if we're doing this? No touching, that makes my kid uncomfortable. You follow my lead even if it looks ridiculous. And we stop at 9 minutes 59 seconds. For the first time since she'd crashed into his world, something like amusement tugged at her mouth. Deal. Dean stepped towards her, calm as someone used to climbing 12-foot ladders to change bulbs, confident and economical in his movements. He picked up a cappuccino tray, polished steel gleaming under the lights, and positioned himself beside her. Timer, bud, he called. Ethan lifted his math workbook like a clapperboard. And action. Dean angled himself so the tray caught the reflections from the windows, scattering the paparazzi's sightlines. To the cameras, it would look like intimacy, like a man leaning close, whispering conspiratorial things into a woman's ear. Who's the guy? Someone shouted outside. Another yelled a name that wasn't hers. Juliana's shoulders tensed, the weight of headlines heavy even here. Dean tilted his chin toward the glass. Trouble. Tilt your head like you just heard a better story than the one they're selling. She did. The change was immediate, the CEO mask softening her jaw, unclenching into something strikingly human. You're good at this, she murmured. I mop floors, Dean replied evenly. And play bodyguard, apparently, just making sure the wolves get bored before the coffee does. He handed her a cappuccino, the heart-shaped foam still intact. For the photograph you didn't ask for. Her laughter was a soft current, the kind that sneaks under a locked door. Do you hand out props to all your pretend girlfriends? Only the one I'm dating for the next 9 minutes, he deadpanned. She nearly spilled the cup. From the corner, Ethan called Dad. He's at the door. Dean turned. A photographer had pushed the cafe door open an inch. Dean moved before the hinge could squeal. Trays snapping up to block the entrance with the polite clang of steel. House policy, he said calmly. Order or out? Come on, man, the photographer groaned, rain dripping from his jacket. She's public interest? No, Juliana said, suddenly stepping beside Dean. Her voice was clear, steady. I'm a human being. There's a difference. The door eased shut. Outside, umbrellas rippled with irritation, then resettled like blackbirds on a wire. Inside, time ticked forward. 3 minutes gone. Dean gestured toward a booth near the window. Sit. If they want a show, let's give them one that doesn't cost your soul. She slid into the seat coat damp against the leather. Dean set another cup down for effect, then crouched to tug the napkin dispenser forward, a small barricade that shielded her phone from prying eyes. Juliana's eyes followed his hands, curious. I hire consultants for crisis management, she murmured. Turns out, I needed a barista. Don't be offended, Dean said, but I'm off the clock in 17 minutes. After that, I'm strictly a dad. Her lips curved faintly. I'm not offended. I'm relieved. 5 minutes left. The rain grew quieter, more thoughtful, as if listening in. Dean leaned against the booth across from her, studying her face. Not the polished version from the headlines, but the fragile edges of someone carrying more weight than applause could offset. They called me reckless this morning, she confessed. Cable news. The lie was sharper than the truth will ever be. There's a trick to lies, Dean answered. They burn quick and bright. Truth doesn't care about fireworks, it just stays. She looked at him, then really looked, the steadiness in his eyes, the unpolished honesty. For a moment, the storm outside was just weather, nothing more. Time check. Ethan bounded over sneakers, thudding softly. 7 minutes. Also, I finished the fractions. Dean slid over hand, resting lightly on his son's shoulder. Show me. Juliana watched that touch. Gentle, respectful, not owning, only assuring. She'd seen men sign billion-dollar partnerships with less reverence than this father gave a worksheet. You're good with him, she said before she could stop herself. You make hard things look easy. Dean shrugged. Only job I ever wanted to be great at. Her gaze flicked to the window. Some paparazzi had already drifted away, searching for a louder storm. She exhaled a little steadier than before. What's your name? She asked suddenly. Dean Walker. That's Ethan. I'm Juliana. I know Ethan said serious as a judge. My grandma watches you on the business channel and yells at the TV when the men interrupt. Juliana laughed real this time. Tell your grandma I've been interrupted by experts. I'll survive. 9 minutes. Almost safe. Dean straightened. How do you want to exit this scene? Juliana thought, then said softly. The back alley. By the time I reach the corner, they'll forget me for dinner plans and neon signs. She hesitated. Could you stand in the doorway with the tray until I'm clear? I don't want them getting bold. Dean picked up the tray, spinning it once like a coin catching light. Bold men love a mirror. Ethan's voice carried from the booth, counting down 9:30, 40, 50. Dean moved, first tray raised like a courteous shield. Juliana followed, closer heels striking wet tile chin high, as if reclaiming command. At the back door, he nudged it open with his shoulder, checking the alley. Clear enough? She slipped into the gray mist, paused, turned back. Thank you. Not for the performance, for not making it a transaction. 10 minutes are up, Dean said gently. You don't owe me anything. Her throat tightened. She tucked a card onto Ethan's math book before stepping into the rain. Then she was gone, swallowed by the city. Dean lowered the tray. The cafe exhaled. Ethan trotted up, solemn. Was she a princess? Dean grinned despite himself. No kiddo. She's the kind of girl who builds the castle and negotiates for better sidewalks. Outside, the storm softened into ordinary rain. Inside, Dean returned to his machine steaming milk that sounded like a small train leaving an honest station. Rain softened to an ordinary hush against the windows, the kind of drizzle a city forgets to notice. Dean set the tray down, the polished steel no longer a shield, just a tool again. The cafe exhaled. Chairs creaked. Someone laughed at a joke that didn't ask for attention. Behind the counter, steam curled from the wand like a sigh that had waited its turn. Ethan slid back into the corner booth and gathered his pencils like a production crew striking a set. He glanced toward the door where the last umbrella ghosted past. She made it? He asked, as if they'd slipped a friend out of a burning theater. She made it, Dean said. He wiped water from the entry mat, broad strokes, deliberate. He checked the lock, then the latch, then the quiet. Calm wasn't just a feeling, it was maintenance performed in small, precise motions. On the table near the register, a rectangle of white rested like a snowflake that refused to melt. Ethan noticed first. "Dad," he called softly, almost reverently. She left this. The card was heavy stock expensive without bragging. Juliana Cross, in embossed type, a direct number written by a hand that made decisions for a living. Beneath it, the smallest drawn heart, no bigger than a coffee bean. Dean didn't pocket it. He tucked it under the register, the place where lost things waited until they proved they wanted to be found. Nora, the owner, emerged from the kitchen with a towel over her shoulder and a face that asked without prying. "We okay?" she said, eyes flicking from the door to the card and back. "We're okay," Dean answered. "Those vultures don't buy scones," she muttered, angling a tray toward the pastry case. "House policy stands." "House policy stands," he echoed, and the words eased something in his chest. He pulled 2 hot chocolates for the last pair of regulars, then wiped the counter with the careful grace of someone who knows people, read love in clean corners. Ethan packed his notebook, the fractions complete and neat, in his small print like someone had built a tiny fence to keep chaos out. "Dad," Ethan said, hovering at the end of the counter. "What did we just do?" Dean considered. He could give his son 1,000 lessons in a single sentence or say it messy and true. He leaned a forearm on the wood and smiled. "We kept someone's head attached to their heart," he said, "and we did it in 10 minutes flat." Ethan nodded like this was a thing you could draw. "Do you think she's lonely?" She didn't look lonely. She looked fast. "Fast can be lonely," Dean said. He straightened the chalkboard where Nora had written "Tomorrow Community Reading Hour," the letters like steady footprints marching across black slate. "You can outrun a lot of things. Lonely keeps pace." They finished closing with the ceremony that turns chores into meaning cups. Nested ground swept, the open sign turned to closed with a tiny click that sounded like dignity putting itself to bed. Outside, the storm had traded temper for reflection. Streetlights threw amber halos on the slick pavement. Ethan shouldered his backpack, a brave weight for a small frame. "Hot cocoa." "When we get home?" he asked. "Always," Dean said. They stepped into the rinsed night. The city felt washed but not forgiven, silvered and honest. On the walk, Ethan kicked a leaf until it gave up and became water again. "Dad, what's pretend?" he asked suddenly. "In movies, it's a job," Dean said. "In life, sometimes it's a bridge. To where?" "To the next honest thing." Ethan considered this long enough to step over a puddle that didn't deserve his socks. "So, we were a bridge for her," Dean said softly. "For now." Their building was an old brick place with clean hallways and a smell of winter coats sleeping along the walls. In the apartment, Dean hung their jackets, lined their shoes like soldiers at attention, and put a pan on the stove. Milk warmed until it sang. Cinnamon dusted the air like a promise. Ethan set 2 mugs on the counter with both hands careful as a surgeon. "Do you think the cameras will come back tomorrow?" Ethan asked. "Cameras always come back," Dean said, "but so do mornings." They drank cocoa at the small table covered in crayon pocks, and the faint scratches of 1,000 homework battles won. Ethan pulled out his paper robot and added a square to its chest, a compartment for a heart. "Looks stronger," Dean said. "It needed armor," Ethan replied. Then after a beat, "You didn't let them make us a show." Dean met his son's eyes. "Dignity doesn't ask for a spotlight," he said. "It brings its own light." Ethan smiled like he'd just memorized a spell. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor started a laundry cycle. The thrum felt like thunder singing itself gentle. After Ethan brushed his teeth and the robot took up a guard post on the nightstand, Dean swished a dishcloth through soapy water and called quiet into the room. He washed the 2 mugs like they'd be needed again, which they always were. Then stood at the window and watched the city finish blinking itself to sleep. His phone vibrated once, an alert from a news app he never asked for. He didn't open it. The headline glowed anyway through the lock screen: "Juliana Cross spotted with mystery man at local cafe." He set the phone face down. He wasn't a headline, and Ethan wasn't a plot twist. He checked the door chain, then checked it again because some rituals are both habit and prayer. When he finally laid down, the ceiling traced shadows across his room like maps of somewhere he didn't need to go. Sleep came in pieces. Twice he woke to the sound of rain auditioning for thunder, and twice he told it no. Morning arrived with a pale gold square across the kitchen floor, and the scent of coffee doing its best work. Ethan's hair refused to learn order a detail Dean loved enough not to fix. They ate toast in the ordinary way. Ethan jammed on his sneakers. The robot went into the backpack with its heart compartment outward like a badge. "Grandma's after school?" Dean asked. "Yep," Ethan said. "She makes grilled cheese like a wizard." "Everyone needs a wizard," Dean said, and kissed his son's forehead with the ease of a man who had chosen the job and never looked back. He walked Ethan down 2 flights to the stoop, watched him join the slow river of kids, then checked his watch. The morning shift waited the one with keys and codes and floors that told the truth about who a building thinks it is. Heartline Tower rose 3 subway stops away, a glass and steel spine stitching itself into the sky. Inside the lobby had a sound-polished quiet, like coins settling in a velvet bag. Security knew him by nod and name. He signed the clipboard because procedure is also a kind of love, then shouldered the supply cart that always felt lighter than it should. On the far wall, a muted television ran a business show. The lower third scrolled, "Cross fends off rumors. Mystery man raises questions." Dean kept moving. He didn't owe the room a face. Elevators sent steel doors sliding with the finality of sentences that don't need witnesses. Dean took the service lift to 18, where the glass meeting rooms floated like aquariums filled with suits and plans. He started with the hallway, because hallways prepare people for the rooms they enter. Mop strokes, even water changed, often corners detailed. He believed in the dignity of invisible work, the kind that holds the world up and never gets a plaque. At a cross corridor, he paused. Through a pane of glass, he could see a small conference room where a young associate had left a coffee ring on the table and a smiley face drawn on a legal pad like a dare to look away from the day. Dean wiped the ring clean through the open door and straightened the pad. He didn't erase the smiley. "Some graffiti is good for morale." "Morning," a voice said behind him, brisk and polite. He turned. A woman with a tablet and a posture that suggested no time for nonsense regarded him with interest, not dismissal. Late 20s, smart eyes badge clipped clean Maya Chen. "You're Dean Walker," she said, as if reading a file only she could see. He nodded. "On paper and in person." She glanced at his cart, then at the corridor he'd already turned from ordinary into respectful. "Ms. Cross would like a word," Maya said. "If you're willing." Dean checked the clock on the wall the way his mind always weighed minutes against Ethan's after-school pickup, like an abacus made of promises. 5. "If it doesn't disturb the work," he said. "It won't disturb anything that matters," Maya replied. 18th floor boardroom. Now. He followed her down the corridor. The carpet gave underfoot like it forgave. When the boardroom door swung open, the city poured in through windows that knew how to keep secrets. People looked up 2 board members on screens, a legal counsel, an empty chair at the far end like an invitation left by someone who believes in chance. Juliana Cross stood at the head of the table. For a breath, neither of them pretended. Yesterday's rain lived faintly in memory, but today the air smelled like glass and deadlines. Her gaze found him with that same startled steadiness, as if somewhere in her map of crisis he had become a landmark. "Mr. Walker," she said, voice even almost warm. "Thank you for coming on short notice." He nodded once, all the permissions he was willing to give on a weekday morning. "I come cheap," he said. "I don't come careless." A corner of her mouth acknowledged the line, but her eyes didn't leave his. "Then let's not waste either," Maya gestured to the empty chair. Dean set his palms on the polished table, grounded as a man who had learned to steady ladders in crosswinds, and took his seat. Outside the glass, the city rearranged its angles. Inside, a plan waited that would make the next 3 weeks feel like a lifetime and a minute all at once. The boardroom gleamed with glass and steel, a cathedral built for numbers and polished arguments. But when Dean sat down, palms flat against the table, the air shifted. He wasn't in a suit. No silk tie, no practiced posture, just a clean shirt, the kind of steady presence that didn't ask permission to exist. Juliana's gaze lingered on him longer than she meant to, remembering last night's storm. remembering the stranger who had blocked flashbulbs with a tray and given her 10 minutes of safety. Now, under the daylight honesty of the 18th floor, he looked the same. No theatrics. Just calm. Agenda Maya said crisply, clicking the remote. The wall screen flickered alive with headlines and stock tickers. Stabilize optics ahead of the quarterly meeting. Decide on a narrative we can live with. Choose the hard way now, or the impossible way later. Hard way, Juliana said immediately. She folded her hands, voice carrying the clipped conviction of someone who had weathered storms bigger than gossip. Always. Dean leaned back slightly, studying the slide, a collage of tabloid headlines and grainy paparazzi photos. His image was there too, tray half-raised expression, unreadable. The caption underneath screamed, "Mystery man at Cross's side, new love or new lie." He exhaled through his nose. "Why am I here?" Juliana didn't flinch. "Because yesterday you kept my head attached to my heart," she said, "and because those photos are out there now. I didn't plan the rumor, but I can steer it." Maya glanced at her notes. 3 weeks. Appear as a couple at selected public events. Not a campaign, just a steady narrative through the shareholder vote. After that, the noise will fade. Dean's brow lifted. "You want me to act like I'm dating you?" "Yes," Juliana said, her eyes holding his without apology. "But no lies about who you are. No staged melodrama. We act like human beings who choose to stand together. That's all." Silence stretched. Dean's mind flicked to Ethan, his son bent over fractions, his small shoulders carrying trust Dean would never betray. "Ground rules," Dean said finally. His tone was even but iron-lined the words. "First and last. My son is off limits. If a camera catches him, if an event interferes with his routine, if a story tries to make him content, my no is the end of the sentence." "Done," Juliana said, no hesitation. Maya added, "We'll establish a media shield. No appearances involving Ethan. Separate protocols for privacy and safety." Dean's jaw unclenched by a fraction. He tapped the table with one finger, weighing. "No gifts, no scripted affection. Nothing that turns me into a prop." "Agreed," Juliana said, voice quiet but resolute. "I won't insult you with theatrics. Not after you gave me honesty in a storm." Dean studied her, searching for cracks. But all he found was steadiness wrapped in exhaustion she refused to show. "What's the fee?" Juliana asked, sliding a folder across the table. Her tone was businesslike, but her eyes softened just enough to say she understood what it cost to ask. Dean hesitated. His pride wrestled with his reality. "I don't need a paycheck. I need a lawyer. Not a cousin who prints forms for cheap. A real one. There's a custody review coming. The other party wants more weekends. I want what's best for my boy." Juliana didn't blink. "We'll set payment terms through a third-party trust. Transparent. It goes to your counsel directly, not through me." Maya was already typing. "Clean line, full compliance." Dean almost smiled. "You're very good at making decent things boring." "That's the only way they stay decent," Maya replied, returning the smile. Juliana flipped a page in the folder. "Appearances begin tonight. ESG Fund Gala. A mixed crowd. Old money. New money. Skeptics, believers. We arrive together. No speeches beyond what's required. No cameras in your son's direction." Dean's eyes narrowed. A gala. In borrowed tuxes and borrowed stories. Not borrowed. Juliana corrected. Tested. She slid a slim document across the table. It wasn't glossy. It wasn't rehearsed. Just typed lines and clauses, each one carrying weight. "Mutual respect," she said. "That's the only contract that matters." Dean read every word, tracing the lines with the focus of someone used to machines that couldn't afford failure. At the end, he looked up. 2 questions. "Ask," Juliana said. "What do I call you when the cameras aren't around?" Her lips curved the faintest release of tension. "Juliana, not Ms. Cross. Titles have their place. They don't belong in kitchens or quiet rooms." Dean nodded once. "Second, who's going to hate this the most?" Maya flicked to her final slide. A grayscale headshot filled the screen's sharp jawline, sharper smile eyes like polished glass. Conrad Vale. Activist investor. He's betting on your soft edges, Juliana. He thinks he can pressure you out if he makes enough noise. Dean studied the photo. He looks like a man who thinks a broom only sweeps one way. Juliana's voice was steel-laced with warmth. Let me worry about Conrad. Dean held her gaze. And who worries about you? She didn't look away. I do. And for 3 weeks apparently you do too. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was a bridge steady enough to walk on. Maya cleared her throat. We'll draft terms and circulate. Appearances start tonight. Dean leaned back, exhaling. Let's write it down. Pens scratched against heavy paper. Not romance, not performance, just respect bound in clauses and ink. When the last page was signed, Juliana capped her pen like closing a door softly. She looked at Dean, a flicker of something in her eyes she refused to name. After hours, she said, We meet at the cafe, not for cameras, to rehearse exits and entrances. So we don't step on each other's toes. Dean's mouth curved faintly. You bring the spine. I'll bring the coffee. She almost smiled. Deal. Outside the city pulsed with headlines waiting to be written. Inside, 2 unlikely allies sat at the same table, unaware that their signatures had just lit the fuse on a story that would test every truth they thought they knew. And somewhere in the quiet corner of Dean's mind, one promise repeated itself like a steady drumbeat: Ethan comes first. Always. The black town car rolled to a stop in front of the Marriott Grand, its awning glowing gold under the drizzle. Red carpets stretched across the wet pavement like defiant ribbons. Flashes sparked even before the door opened. Dean tugged at his collar, already regretting agreeing to a tux. The bow tie strangled him like a bad decision. Relax, Juliana murmured beside him. She sat, poised, hair swept back in an elegant knot. Emerald gown shimmering like it had been cut from the night itself. She didn't look like a woman on trial with investors. She looked like control. Dean gave her a dry glance. Relax. I mop floors in these buildings at 2 a.m. I don't stroll through them in black tie. She leaned in, her perfume subtle but steady, like cedar after rain. Then tonight, you're not a janitor. You're my partner. That's all anyone needs to know. He huffed a quiet laugh. And here I thought honesty was part of the deal. The door opened. Flashes detonated. Voices swelled. Juliana, over here. Who's the mystery man? Dean stepped out first, shielding her with his frame. For a split second, cameras caught his shoulders squared like a wall. Then Juliana emerged, slipping her hand through his arm. The crowd roared a feeding frenzy of questions. Inside the gala's marble lobby, chandeliers dripped crystal. A string quartet's notes floated like fragile glass, but Dean's eyes stayed on her heels. High sharp, too delicate for slick stone. He noticed the wobble before anyone else did. 3 steps and her heel snapped. Not loudly, just enough to throw her balance. Her hand clutched his sleeve. In that fraction of a second, Dean reacted. He caught her steadying her weight. Cameras clicked like gunfire from behind. Juliana's face didn't falter. Her lips curved into a serene smile. Only Dean felt her grip tighten like steel. Keep walking, she whispered. He glanced down. The heel dangled useless. With practiced calm, Dean guided her toward the nearest column out of direct sight lines. He crouched without ceremony, pulling a small roll of black tape from his jacket pocket, left over from work, stuffed in out of habit. Juliana blinked down at him. You brought tape to a gala. He didn't look up. You brought a janitor. Comes with the territory. With steady hands, he braced the heel, taping it securely, then slipped a safety pin through the strap from his cufflink kit. He gave it one quick test, solid enough to last the night. When he stood, their eyes met. Something unspoken flickered there. Respect, gratitude, maybe more. You saved me again, she said under her breath. He adjusted her arm on his. No, I just kept you standing. Saving is your department. Together they moved back into the glow of the lobby, perfectly timed with the string quartet's crescendo. To the cameras, it looked flawless, just another graceful entrance. But at the far end of the hall, a man in a navy suit smirked. Conrad Vale. His drink swirled gold under the chandeliers. Well, well, Conrad drawled when they approached. Juliana Cross with a new accessory. I didn't know the janitorial union loaned dates now. Dean didn't flinch. He tilted his head tone even. Funny thing about accessories, they break when you lean on them too hard. Tools, though, they keep working. Conrad's smirk faltered for a split beat. Then he chuckled, lifting his glass. Sharp tongue for someone polishing floors. Careful, Cross. You might actually make them believe this stunt. Juliana's smile didn't waver. Believe what you want, Conrad. The numbers will speak louder than you ever will. They walked past Dean's hand steady against hers, but inside Juliana's pulse hammered. She hadn't planned for a rival's sneer to sting less than the comfort of Dean's quiet defense. Hours later, when speeches ended and glasses clinked, Juliana excused herself from the table. In the powder room's mirror, she studied the taped heel and thought of Dean kneeling without hesitation, hands steady as stone. For the first time in years, she wondered if her image wasn't what needed saving, if maybe, just maybe, it was her heart. But as she stepped back into the ballroom, her phone buzzed with a single text from Maya. CPS complaint filed, Dean's name on it. Juliana's stomach turned cold. Juliana's hand trembled as she lowered the phone, its screen dimming into the hush of the gala's soft lighting. She forced her breath steady, smoothing her gown as though fabric could anchor her mind. Across the ballroom, Dean stood near the buffet, back to the wall, surveying the crowd with quiet vigilance. He had no idea. She slipped past champagne trays and whispered conversations until she reached Maya, who was posted near the exit like a watchtower in heels. Maya, Juliana murmured, keeping her face poised. Tell me that message was an error. Maya's eyes were hard. No error. A formal complaint was filed with Child Protective Services. It questions Dean's capacity as a custodial parent. Juliana's pulse spiked. On what grounds? Vague. Unfit environment, unsafe hours, unstable income. Maya tapped her phone, voice low and crisp. Anonymous, but my money's on Conrad Vale or someone he pays. The timing's too neat. It's designed to rattle him before the proxy vote. Juliana exhaled sharply, fury tightening her chest. He asked for one thing, just one. Leave his son out of it. Her gaze found Dean again. He hadn't noticed the shift. He was scanning the chandelier's fragile rigging like it was another job site, the habit of a man who never stopped checking for weak beams. Juliana's throat constricted. She thought of the tape in his pocket, the quick way he had caught her when she fell. And now someone was targeting the one person he couldn't tape back together with steady hands. We can't tell him here, Maya warned softly. Not with cameras around. He'd rip Conrad's smirk right off his face, and the tabloids would feast for weeks. Juliana nodded, though her stomach rebelled. She straightened her shoulders, slipping her mask of calm back on. Then tonight we smile. Tomorrow we fight. As if on cue, Dean noticed her across the room, his brow furrowed, reading her tension even through the glow of chandeliers. He crossed the floor in slow, sure steps, the crowd partying unconsciously for his presence. You okay? He asked. Voice pitched low as he offered her a glass of water. Juliana took it, careful not to spill. Long night, too many speeches. Dean studied her face, unfooled, but he didn't push. Instead, he shifted slightly so his body blocked her from the line of Conrad's lingering gaze. That one quiet move wrapped her in more safety than 100 security details. The gala dragged until midnight. By the time they slid into the car, Juliana's composure had splintered. Dean loosened his tie, rolling his shoulders. Out with it, he said, What did Vale whisper in your ear? You've been on edge since the second set. Juliana hesitated. Dean. Don't, he cut in gently. Don't polish it? I spent years listening to engines groan before they cracked. I know when something's about to blow. She stared at the passing city lights, then finally said it. CPS complaint. Filed tonight. Your name's on it. The silence that followed was thick like glass about to shatter. Dean's hand tightened into a fist on his knee. Who? He demanded. Not a question, a sentence. We don't know yet, Juliana said quickly, but Maya thinks Conrad is pulling strings. It's too targeted, too sudden. Dean's jaw flexed. My boy, they're going after my boy. His voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. The kind of fury that lived quiet could burn the longest. Juliana reached across the seat, laying her hand lightly on his arm. We'll fight it. You're not alone in this. He turned eyes dark, then softened a fraction at the sincerity in hers. You don't owe me that fight. Don't I? She asked quietly. You held me steady when the world wanted me to fall. Maybe it's my turn. The car swayed through the wet streets. Neither spoke for a long while. At last, Dean's voice came low. Tomorrow, first thing, I'm calling Ethan's school, making sure he's shielded from this mess. Juliana nodded. And I'll have Maya secure the best family attorney on retainer. Anonymous complaints don't stand when the truth is clear. Dean rubbed his face, the exhaustion of years weighing heavy. Ethan's all I've got. They can take every shift, every dollar. But not him. You won't lose him, Juliana said firmly. Not while I still have breath to stand. Outside, the rain-slick streets reflected the city's neon blaze, fractured like a million broken promises. But inside that car, two people who had no reason to trust anyone were slowly weaving threads of something stronger than contracts. Juliana looked at Dean, his profile carved by fatigue and fury, and thought, they picked the wrong man to corner, and the wrong woman to stand beside him. The knock wasn't loud, but it carried paperwork in its bones. 3 measured taps that paused the apartment's morning hum. Dean wiped his hands on a dish towel and opened the door to a woman in a navy blazer with rain freckles on her shoulders and a badge clipped where no one could miss it. "Mr. Walker," she asked. "That's me. Angela Ruiz, Child Protective Services, scheduled welfare check." Ethan peeked from the hallway, socked feet, whispering over the rug, the paper robot cupped in both hands like a fragile animal. "Dad." "It's okay, bud," Dean said, keeping his voice a low lake. "Just a visit." A second softer knock arrived on the heels of the first. When Dean swung the door wider, Juliana stood there with a takeout bag, hair damp from a stubborn drizzle, the kind of tired that good makeup doesn't bother to fight. She took in Angela's badge in a blink and managed a smile that didn't argue with the moment. "Dinner delivery belated," she said lightly. "And I can come back. You can come in." Dean answered. To Angela, he added, "If that's fine." Angela nodded. "Visitors are fine. We're here to see the ordinary." The ordinary in Dean's apartment had edges softened by use, a small corkboard stitched with Ethan's spelling test shoes lined like small soldiers by the door, a kitchen where the pan knew the weight of milk by memory. The air still carried a hint of last night's cinnamon, the scent of a ritual that made a boy feel chosen. "We'll start with Ethan's room," Angela said, professional, but not unkind. "Then kitchen. Any medications. Then a few questions." Dean angled a hand. "After you." Ethan's room was a map of a kid who thinks in Steps comics stacked by issue robot parts arrayed on a towel, pencils squared like runway lights. A nightlight waited in an outlet like a small moon. Angela ran her gaze along the edges, testing with questions that wore no teeth. "Bedtime 8:30, Dean said. "Reading after. Lights at 9. Supervision. If I work late, he's with my sister or Ms. Duffy next door. Both cleared last review. School on time. Homework at the cafe if I'm on shift. He likes to do math where the machine hisses." Ethan nudged the robot toward her. "He's getting a heart compartment," he explained softly. "So when the noise scares him, he can put the good things inside." Angela's mouth did a small thing that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't far from one. "That's excellent engineering," she said. "What goes in first?" "Hot cocoa," Ethan answered, and my dad's voice when he says it's time to sleep. In the kitchen, Angela opened cabinets with the respect of someone who expects good answers and sometimes gets them. Cleaning supplies were on a high shelf latched. A smoke detector tested with a single obedient chirp. The fridge held groceries arranged by habit. Not display eggs, greens, leftovers in labeled containers. A simple calendar on the wall wore blue circles around school nights and a red star 2 weeks out that said simply, "Check in." Angela made notes. "Has there been a change in your work schedule? Evening cafe shifts. Daytime janitorial 2 days a week," Dean said. "Never both late on the same night. Income stability." Enough to keep the lights on and the pan singing. Angela asked about medical history, emergency contacts, a dentist appointment next Thursday. Dean answered with file folders already set on the counter, report cards, immunization records, a letter from Ethan's teacher that said, "What teachers say when the evidence is obvious, respectful, punctual, curious, safe." Juliana lingered a step back, not interfering, scanning the room with the quiet inventory of someone who knows how to read care in the posture of objects. She noticed the dish rack 2 mugs still beaded from a wash that looked like gratitude. She noticed the way Dean let silence lead when Ethan spoke. She noticed the way the apartment felt small, yes, but generous. Angela closed her folder partway and looked up official again. Mr. Walker, this visit was prompted by an anonymous concern. It's routine. I will recommend a follow-up in 2 weeks, but I want to be clear, I'm not seeing immediate risks. Ethan's shoulders loosened. Dean only nodded. Understood. Questions for me, Angela offered. Just one, Dean said. How do I keep my son's name out of rooms that want to turn kids into stories? Angela hesitated, then answered the way good public servants do, honest, without pretending honesty could solve everything. Set boundaries. No interviews involving him. No photos without consent. Monitor for leaks. And if the noise escalates, we can coordinate a media exposure plan with the school. Juliana stepped forward, respectful. Our legal team can draft those boundaries this week and route them through you. Clear, enforceable language. Angela glanced at her badge, then at Juliana's face, then back to Dean. That would help. They walked Angela to the door. She paused in the frame, rain-stitching lines through the hall light behind her. You have a good home, she said to Dean. Then to Ethan. Your robot's heart compartment is the smartest thing I've seen all day. After the door clicked shut, silence sat with them like a fourth person who meant well. Dean leaned against the counter, the dish towel twisting slowly in his hands. He looked at Juliana not with blame, but with the fatigue of a man who had learned to tell storms from weather. You didn't have to see that, he said. I'm glad I did, she replied. It made the truth louder than the rumor. He breathed out that long kind of breath that lets the ribs move again. Some people hear CPS and think the word means failure. He shook his head. It means someone whispered in the dark. The system checks. It's what it's supposed to do. Juliana set the takeout bag on the table and opened cartons. Rice still steaming, chicken glistening, something green that deserved applause. Eat, she said gently. Then we plan. He didn't argue. They sat. Ethan told them about a kid in his class who could draw dragon wings on notebook paper that looked like they could fly. The ordinary made room for itself, as ordinary does when invited. When Ethan took his plate to the sink and ran the faucet like a miniature river, Dean spoke again. I'll call the school in the morning. Let them know to redirect anything that smells like media. I'll have Maya draft the protection language tonight, Juliana said, and connect you with a family attorney who knows CPS procedure in their sleep. He lifted a palm. I appreciate the help, but my no is still the end of the sentence where Ethan is concerned. It is, she said. No flinch, no sales pitch. I'm not here to be the loudest voice. I'm here to back yours. The dishwater hummed. Ethan dried his hands on a towel 3 times his size, then left the robot on the table and padded off to brush his teeth. For a minute, the apartment was just sync music and shoelaces learning their knots. Juliana studied Dean's face, the lines earned honestly. I hate that it came to your door, she said. He asked for one thing. Leave his son out of it, Dean finished. Yeah. He turned the robot gently in his hands, thumb settling on the tiny square Ethan had built for a heart. They think making noise makes them bigger than the room, he said. But a kid's life is small on purpose. That's the point. Small, safe, boring when it wants to be. Juliana's voice lowered. If it helps, Maya's already pulling threads. We'll know where this came from. He almost smiled. I know exactly where it came from. I just don't want to spend the next 2 weeks teaching my boy what retaliation means. Then we teach him what quiet means, she said. Not silence, the kind you choose. Ethan reappeared in pajama pants with dinosaurs arguing across them and leaned into Dean's side with the full trust of a small gravity. Can Ms. Juliana stay for Coco? He asked. If she wants to, Dean said, checking her face. Please, Juliana answered, a surprising softness in the word, like something relieved to be asked for once instead of demanded. But I should leave before it's late. Dean warmed the pan again. Milk Rose sang. He whisked cocoa and cinnamon until the smell stitched the room together. They stood around the small stove like it was a campfire. Ethan sipped with the ceremony the drink deserved. Dad. Ethan said without looking up. Am I? The reason the cameras are mean. Dean crouched until they were eye to eye, the kitchen tile cool through his knees. No, he said. The reason they're mean is because they're lazy. Me and Ms. Juliana are going to make their job boring. Boring is good, Ethan decided, and drank. When it was time for bed, Ethan hugged Juliana with the easy certainty of a kid who can smell a safe person. Thanks for dinner, he said, and for being fast when the world is loud. Juliana's laugh was small and true. I'll work on being fast and quiet. After his door closed, Dean walked Juliana to the threshold. The hallway light made a slim crown on her hair. For a moment, neither moved. You're allowed to be angry, she said. I am, he answered. I'm also allowed to be precise. Tomorrow I'll brief Maya. We'll get the boundaries drafted. And Dean, she hesitated, choosing a word that didn't cost too much. We can pause public appearances if that shields him. He looked past her to the stairwell and the miles of city beyond it. We do whatever keeps Ethan's name out of strangers' mouths, he said. If that means the world thinks we retreated, they can have their headline. We'll keep our quiet. Her breath caught, not in pain exactly, but in recognition. Then we start there. She stepped into the hall and turned back, once a small tilt of thanks that didn't need a speech. When the door latched, Dean set his palm to the wood for the length of a heartbeat, then turned out the kitchen light. The apartment settled. The calendar on the wall kept its 2-week promise without swagger. Outside the city muttered its late songs. Inside, a father rinsed 2 mugs and set them on the rack like tomorrow would ask for them again. It would. 2 weeks is both a long time and no time at all. For Dean, it passed in dishes, rinsed, coffee-poured mop strokes across empty halls, and the familiar click of Ethan's pencil in the evenings. For Juliana, it passed in boardrooms where words like stability and shareholder confidence were wielded like blades. The follow-up visit came on a gray Thursday. Angela Ruiz returned this time with less paper and more ease. She asked her questions, checked Ethan's room, noted the calendar with 2 new blue circles, and closed her folder with a soft thump. No concerns, she said. This file will close. Ethan grinned, and Dean's shoulders dropped like they'd been carrying the ceiling. Angela shook his hand firmly, nodded to Juliana, and left. For a moment, the apartment filled with the rare kind of silence that doesn't ache, it rests. Juliana was the first to break it. You know, this doesn't end it right. Conrad isn't the type to back down because one door closed. Dean leaned against the counter, arms folded. Then he can bang on locked doors until his knuckles split. My son's not for sale, not for smear, not for story. She watched him a moment, then reached into her bag. Then maybe it's time we play offense. From a leather folder, she pulled a set of papers. Contract. Confidentiality clauses. A non-disclosure that spelled out in sharp letters what had been only spoken between them. Dean glanced at the first page, then raised a brow. A contract for pretending. A contract for protecting, Juliana corrected. This codifies boundaries. It keeps Ethan's name sealed. It keeps my board off your back. And it makes it harder for Conrad to twist shadows into rumors. Dean flipped the page eyes, narrowing at the legalese. I'm a janitor. My contracts are usually a mop and a clock-in sheet. You want me to sign something that makes my life a headline if it goes sideways? Juliana stepped closer, her tone low. I want you to have leverage if they come after you again. You've already been dragged in once. I won't let it happen twice. For a heartbeat, silence sat between them like an uninvited guest. Dean set the papers down carefully. I'll look it over, he said. But I don't sign until someone I trust explains every comma. Juliana almost smiled. That's the smartest thing I've heard in a boardroom tone all week. Before more could be said, Ethan wandered in pajamas, rumpled hair, sticking in directions that defied reason. Dad, the robot's heart won't stay closed, he mumbled. Dean crouched. Show me. Ethan handed over the small cardboard contraption. The flap meant to cover the heart compartment kept slipping. Dean studied it, then pulled a paperclip from the counter, bending it into a hinge. He fastened it gently, and the flap held. Sometimes you don't force it shut, he told his son. You give it a hinge so it can open and close without breaking. Ethan nodded, satisfied. Like a real heart. Juliana's gaze lingered on the boy, then on Dean's hand, steady over the paper robot. Something inside her shifted an echo of what she had once wanted for herself, but buried under ledgers and meetings. Later that night, when she left the apartment, Dean walked her to the door. Rain streaked the hallway window, the city's neon blurred into watercolor. "You don't owe us this fight," he said quietly. Juliana met his eyes. "Maybe I do. Or maybe for once I want to fight for something that matters more than numbers." Dean didn't answer right away. He only nodded, then closed the door softly after her. But what neither of them saw was Conrad Vale standing across the street beneath an umbrella, watching the lights go out one by one in Dean's apartment. His phone glowed with a message he was already drafting. "Push harder. Leak new angle. Target the janitor." He smirked as he hit send. The storm wasn't over. It was just moving closer. The first headline hit on a Monday morning, buried mid-scroll beneath weather updates and market chatter. "CEO's secret companion has a past the board should question." Dean's phone buzzed before his second cup of coffee. A coworker slid it across the counter at the cafe, lips tight. "That you?" he asked. Dean scanned the piece. Grainy photos of him walking Ethan to school. The boy's face blurred but still there. Words like custodial worker and living paycheck to paycheck, dressed up like evidence. And the kicker, is this the man influencing the company's most powerful executive? He shoved the phone back. "Don't read it aloud, not here." By the time he clocked out that night, the whispers had sprouted legs. Customers lingered longer than usual. Two teens snickered at the counter, one holding up a phone like a shield. Dean kept moving, mopping floors with strokes that told the tile nothing about the fire under his skin. When he stepped outside, Juliana was waiting near the lamppost, hair swept back, trench coat sharp against the drizzle. The glow from passing headlights cut across her face, half steel, half fatigue. "You saw it?" she asked. "Hard to miss." Dean answered. "They blurred my son, but anyone in our neighborhood knows that jacket. They may as well have painted a target." Juliana's jaw tightened. Vale. "It's his style feed crumbs, let the crowd do the tearing." Dean's voice was low, steady. "He drags me fine. But if Ethan so much as gets side-eyed at school, this ends in a courtroom." Juliana nodded, then handed him a folder. "Our legal team drafted the cease and desist already. But, Dean, he's not just playing press. He's probing your life for cracks. Debt history custody disputes anything." "I don't have skeletons," Dean said flatly. "Just bills and calluses." "Then he'll invent them," Juliana warned. As if on cue, a black sedan slowed near the curb. Its tinted window rolled halfway down, camera flash, igniting like lightning, quick and invasive. Dean stepped instinctively in front of Juliana, jaw set, hands curled into fists. "Get used to it," she muttered, though her voice carried a tremor. "He won't stop until he draws blood." Dean glanced at her. "Then we don't bleed." That night, Ethan curled up on the couch beside Dean Robot, clutched to his chest. "Dad, why are people taking pictures of us?" Dean tucked the boy under a blanket. "Because they don't know us," he said softly. "They make stories when they don't know the truth." "Do you tell them the truth?" Ethan asked. Dean kissed his son's hair. "Sometimes the truth isn't what they want. Sometimes the truth is just ours." In the kitchen, Juliana leaned against the counter, watching her throat tight. She had spent years defending numbers, strategies, mergers. Yet here, in a two-room apartment with peeling paint, she realized what defending people actually looked like. She crossed the room, crouched so she was eye level with Ethan. "You know what your dad's right about?" she asked gently. "You don't have to explain yourself to anyone who isn't safe." Ethan studied her face, then whispered, "Are you safe?" The question caught her. For a moment, the CEO disappeared and only Juliana remained. She nodded. "Yes, I am." Ethan seemed satisfied, tucking the robot into the blanket with him. Juliana stood, but Dean's eyes followed her, measuring the truth she'd just given, as if it mattered more than the folder of legal defenses on the counter. Outside, Conrad Vale sat in his sedan reviewing the photos. He smiled coldly. The janitor wasn't breaking yet, but pressure had a way of finding the weakest wall, and Vale was very, very patient. By Wednesday morning, Conrad Vale's smear campaign had grown legs. The tabloids traded whispers for Roar's single father or opportunist janitor's connection to CEO raises questions. Each article bled the same poison, the same implication that Dean was climbing through Juliana's world, not by merit, but by manipulation. Dean read none of it. He couldn't stomach the bile. But he heard the echoes. A neighbor's cautious wave. A teacher's clipped tone on the phone. Even Ethan came home quiet, backpack slung lower than usual. At the apartment table, Dean tried to fix his son's favorite toy, a little wind-up car, but the spring wouldn't catch. Ethan watched silently until he blurted, "Dad, someone said, you only hang out with Miss Juliana 'cause she's rich." Dean's hand stilled. The words cut sharper than any headline. He set the car down, met Ethan's eyes. "Listen to me. I stand by Juliana because she's human, because she's worth standing by, not because of a bank account." "You understand?" Ethan nodded slowly, but the bruise of doubt lingered. That evening, Juliana arrived unannounced, her heels clicking over the cracked hallway linoleum. She carried no folder, no laptop, just a bag of groceries and eyes shadowed with fatigue. "I figured you could use a dinner without headlines," she said softly. Dean blinked. "You cook." "Barely," she admitted with a wry smile. "But I follow directions." "That counts." They chopped vegetables in a silence broken only by the scrape of knives and Ethan's soft humming from the other room. For the first time in days, the apartment smelled of garlic and hope. Midway through, Juliana's phone buzzed. A message from Maya lit the screen. "Board is unsettled. Vale stirring votes. Brace yourself." Her throat tightened. She set the phone face down. Dean caught the flicker in her expression. "Bad news." "Just Vale being Vale," she said. Then after a pause, "He's pressing the board harder. If they think my judgment is compromised, they'll push me out." Dean wiped his hands on a towel. "And if they do," Juliana met his gaze, "then I lose more than a title. I lose everything I've built to protect my father's legacy." Dean studied her a long moment. Then he said, "Maybe it's not about what you built. Maybe it's about what you keep standing for after it's stripped." The words landed heavy. Juliana swallowed, turning back to the pan before the ache in her chest betrayed her. Dinner passed in fragile warmth. Ethan giggled when Juliana nearly dropped a ladle. Dean smirked when she burned her tongue on soup. For an hour, the smear campaign didn't exist. But once Ethan was asleep, Juliana lingered at the door coat draped over her arm. "Dean, if this storm gets worse, you need to be ready." He leaned on the frame. "Ready for what?" "For them to dig deeper. For them to drag out things that should stay private. They'll try to break you by any means." Dean's jaw set. "They won't break me. They'll just learn what fighting looks like when you've got nothing left to lose but the truth." Juliana's breath caught at the steel in his tone. She touched his arm lightly, almost without thinking. "Don't let them harden you," she whispered. "That's what they want." Their eyes held in the dim hallway, neither stepping back until a sudden sound split the quiet, the metallic clatter of an envelope sliding beneath Dean's door. He bent, picking it up. No return address. Heavy, thick paper. Inside, photocopies of old employment files, an accident report from a construction site years ago, and a single line scrawled in pen, "Unfit father. Unstable past. More coming." Dean's fingers curled around the paper's knuckles white. Juliana felt the air tighten, the fragile warmth of dinner already evaporating into dread. Vale wasn't done. He was just starting to bare his teeth. The envelope sat between them on the kitchen table like a live wire. Dean flipped through the pages, jaw tight. A decade-old incident report glared back his name scrawled beside words like injury on site and workplace dispute. It wasn't damning. It wasn't even unusual for construction work. But in the wrong hands, twisted the wrong way, it painted a man as reckless, unstable. Juliana skimmed her pulse, quickening. This is Vale. He's testing how far he can push without getting caught. Dean's voice was flat. Testing, he's already in my home. Not yet, she said firmly. This is intimidation, not evidence. Dean shoved the papers back into the envelope, his chair scraping. Tell that to Ethan when he sees strangers snapping pictures or hears lies at school. Juliana reached for his arm, stopping him mid-motion. Her touch was light, but her eyes steady. Dean, look at me. You've already faced worse than this. You walked through war zones, you raised a child alone. Vale's just a man with money and ink. He doesn't know resilience when he sees it. Dean met her gaze, his breathing slowing. The words didn't erase the fury, but they steadied it. That night after Juliana left, Dean sat at Ethan's bedside longer than usual. The boy's chest rose and fell in soft rhythm, his robot clutched like a talisman. Dean brushed back Ethan's hair and whispered, "They won't take what's ours." Morning brought no relief. Vale's campaign escalated. Flyers appeared near the school. "Would you trust this janitor with your children?" Dean tore one down, fists shaking. By the time he returned home, 2 more had been posted. Juliana stormed into her office that same afternoon, Maya close behind with a stack of reports. "The board is rattling," Maya said. "Vale's feeding them stories about Dean. They're starting to wonder if your judgment is compromised." Juliana slammed a folder shut. Compromised. For protecting someone decent. "Perception is their gospel," Maya warned. "And Vale knows it." Juliana pressed her palms to the glass window overlooking the city. Her reflection looked back at her perfect hair-sharp suit, but a fracture behind the eyes. She whispered almost to herself, "I won't let them do this to him." Or to Ethan. That evening, Dean returned to find Juliana already at his kitchen table. She had brought more than groceries this time, she had brought resolve. "Vale won't stop until one of us breaks," she said. "So we stop him first." Dean dropped his work bag, pulling out the torn flyer. "How lawyers' articles?" "They play in his arena, he owns the scoreboard." Juliana leaned forward. "Then we drag him into ours." "Truth. Transparency. You speak, not as my pretend companion, as who you are, a veteran, a father, a man who works 2 jobs and still shows up for his kid. They can't smear honesty if you stand in it." Dean let out a rough laugh. "You think anyone's listening to a janitor over a billionaire? I do," she said firmly. "Because I will make them listen." Silence stretched. The rain pattered on the window, the hum of the city a dull echo. Dean finally sank into the chair across from her. "You're asking me to stand in front of cameras," he said. "I'm asking you to stand in front of the truth," Juliana countered. Ethan wandered in, rubbing his eyes. "Dad? Miss Juliana, why are you talking so loud?" Dean gathered his son into his lap, kissing his hair. "We're talking about telling people who we really are, Bud." Ethan tilted his head. "Like when I told Mrs. Pierce I didn't break the vase, even though everyone thought I did?" Dean smiled faintly. "Exactly like that." Juliana's throat tightened. Out of the mouth of a child came the clearest strategy. She rose, sliding a business card across the table. "Tomorrow morning, press conference. Be there." Dean stared at the card. He had sworn to keep his head down to protect Ethan by staying invisible. Now the only way forward was the opposite, stepping into light that burned. He looked at his son, then back at Juliana. "If I do this, it's not for you. It's for him." Juliana nodded once. "That's exactly why it will work." Outside, thunder cracked. The storm was no longer at a distance. It was right over their roof. The room wore morning light and restraint. No banners, no sponsor wall, just a lectern, 2 side screens, and a white placard on an easel that read, "Heartline Transparency Briefing." Security stood along the walls, not to intimidate, but to keep the temperature civilized. Reporters filed in with notebooks and phones, their voices the low buzz of bees deciding whether to sting. Backstage, Maya adjusted the tiny mic at Juliana's collar and smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from her jacket. "No spin." She said the reminder more ritual than instruction. "No spin?" Juliana echoed, letting the words settle in her bones. She'd slept 4 hours on a couch, woke to a text from Dean. "We'll be there." 2 words that felt like ballast. She stepped to the podium. The room quieted the way rooms do when they sense the truth won't ask for applause. "Good morning," she began. "I'm Juliana Cross. I said I would stand here without a varnish, so I will." She let the microphones find her cadence. "Our public narrative for the next quarter is not romance distraction or rumor. It's operations risk numbers. That's what you can audit. That's what I will answer." A camera shutter clicked, then forgot itself. She glanced to Maya. The left screen lit with a simple flowchart: dates, burner email routes, a PR vendor payments that hopped like stones across a creek toward Conrad Vale's office. Not lurid, just clear. In recent weeks, Juliana continued a burner account seeded stories implying, I staged a relationship and worse, targeted a private citizen, Dean Walker, with insinuations designed to trigger a Child Protective Services visit. CPS did its job. They found a stable home and a good kid. The smear failed on facts, not volume. She let the sentence land, felt the room tilt toward listening instead of feeding. Hands rose. Are you alleging Mr. Vale? I'm stating, she intercut even but firm, that our ethics committee and partner funds have the materials, emails, invoices, and audio acknowledging the tactic. I'm not here to perform prosecution. I'm here to say we will not play that game. A murmur rippled. In the second row, a columnist with honest ink in his marrow lifted a hand. Ms. Cross, the man in the photos. Are you confirming a relationship? Juliana breathed once, a measured inhale that tasted like cold glass and clean conscience. I'm confirming we treat people like they're not disposable. Whatever else you want to name it belongs to your page, not our policy. Phones vibrated as editors somewhere argued adjectives. Juliana set her hands on the lectern, the posture of a person who has stopped negotiating with fear. One more thing before we turn to operations, she said. The past few weeks did harm not to a company but to people. Dean Walker is not a prop. He is a father, a veteran, and a man whose dignity doesn't require my permission. The delay in drawing a hard line is mine. Her voice thinned, then steadied. Dean, I'm sorry I didn't protect you soon enough. Ethan, I'm sorry the noise reached your sidewalk. That's on me. Silence found its manners. Somewhere a pen stopped mid-scratch. At the back of the hall, a security guard shifted, less bored than a minute ago, and because his name has been used without his say. Juliana added, I asked him to speak for himself. Not as anyone's mystery, anything, but as who he is. Dean. He entered simply like a door opening to air you forgot you needed. Clean shirt, no jacket. That purposeful posture of a man who has carried weight without advertising it. He didn't touch the podium. He stood beside it, hands in plain sight. Morning, he said. If he was nervous, it didn't borrow his voice. I'm Dean Walker. I fix what squeaks for buildings that like to pretend they never squeak. And I raise a boy who believes robots need heart compartments. A small tilt at the corner of his mouth there and gone. A chuckle scattered, cautious and grateful. I've heard a lot of names for what the last few weeks have been, he continued. I can't answer to all of them. I can answer to one. Every night my title is father. Cameras don't make me more of a father. Headlines don't make me less. He let that settle. I'm grateful CPS did their job. I'm not grateful someone tried to weaponize that process. Where I'm from, you don't use kids as leverage. You don't turn kitchen tables into battlegrounds. The room held its breath, reporters' lenses, executives streaming this on laptops across the city. Even the HVAC hush seemed to lean closer. If you want a comment from me about being a mystery man, Dean finished, here it is. We keep our promises where the cameras aren't. He stepped back. No grand gesture, no triumphant nod, just space returned to its proper size. Questions pounced because that is their job. Mr. Walker. Did you? Ms. Cross, do you regret will Mr. Vale? Juliana reclaimed the mic, composed without ice. Operational questions go to our CFO at 11. Ethics questions go to the committee. Questions about private citizens will not be answered today, tomorrow, or next week. We are drawing a line in a color you can't miss. Maya gave the subtlest signal from the wings. The right screen lit with a one-page internal memo, interim guardrails for investor conduct, explicit prohibitions against targeting employees, family members, or private citizens for leverage. Effective immediately, pending formal vote. We should not have needed to write that, Juliana said. Now we have. Phones vibrated like a chorus. Maya's tablet popped with banners. Partner Fund calls emergency ethics review. Allied board moves to censure. The room didn't know yet, but the tide had already turned upriver. A reporter near the aisle tried once more. Do you anticipate Mr. Vale facing removal at his other funds? That's theirs to choose, Juliana answered. When you show your homework, the math teaches itself. She closed her folder, not in triumph, but in completion. We're publishing a transcript of this briefing and our supporting documentation. Not to win a day. to honor the long day called accountability. The moderator thanked the room. Security didn't hustle, they guided. The buzz rose, but something had changed timbre from hungry to sober. The fluorescent lights seemed less cruel. Backstage, the quiet tasted like water. Maya slid in eyes bright with the victory she refused to call a victory. 2 funds launched formal inquiries while you were speaking, she said. A third is queuing a no-confidence vote. You didn't swing, you just set gravity loose. Juliana's mouth quirked relief threaded with caution. Then let the process do the talking. Dean stood a few feet away, checking his phone. A text from Grandma Ethan aced his reading quiz. Want cinnamon tonight? He smiled into the screen like a person who knows exactly what matters. Juliana turned to him. For a moment, the world thinned to 2 people in a hallway where paint had been touched up just enough to pretend it hadn't been scuffed. You were good. She said the word too small and still exactly right. Thank you. He shook his head. You did the unglamorous part. You made it official. Her eyes softened. For the record? No. Not for the record, she corrected herself, surprising them both. For Ethan. I'm going to keep distance for a while. Not because this is nothing, because if it's something I don't want a room full of microphones deciding its shape. He absorbed at the truth, and the bruise welded together. I figured he said honest as concrete. Then gentler. If we're right for the long road, a few quiet miles won't break us. A breath she didn't know she'd been holding, let go. I'm learning, she said. How to stand for the right things without asking the world to clap. He glanced toward the stage where techs coiled cables like well-trained snakes. Some rooms teach you to talk loud, he said. Others teach you to listen. You just made one of the second kind. Maya reappeared with a folder lighter this time. Press wants comment on Vale, she said. We'll send them to the committee. And she hesitated, a rare thing. There's space on the 11th floor we aren't using. The facilities team could turn it in a week. Chairs, a coffee station, lockers, a door that closes, a sign that says quiet room. Juliana didn't look away from Dean. Make it happen, she said. Then to him quietly. Your idea, I'll only sign off. He smiled something in his shoulders, releasing like a knot deciding to be a bow. I'll bring a list, he said. Things people need that no one remembers until it's too late. Bring it, Maya said. I'll bring procurement. A cluster of reporters drifted past the curtain, hoping for a stray sentence. None came. Some stories are not for them. They stepped out into the hallway, which smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and new paper. Through the glass doors, the city practiced its indifference taxis, sleeking past a delivery bike, weaving with a grace that deserved more than a shrug. Juliana and Dean paused where their paths forked hers to the elevator, and a tranche of meetings his to the street, and a boy who would be waiting with a cinnamon request and a newly confident voice. We started by pretending for the world, she said, almost amused at the way beginnings tie themselves to endings. And we'll keep our promises where the cameras aren't, he finished. They didn't hug. They didn't stage a look. They just nodded like people who had endured a weather system together and were now content to check the forecast before the next walk. By midday, emails would ping in rooms that thought themselves immune to consequence. By evening, policy drafts would turn into language that could be enforced. And somewhere around dinner time in a 2-room apartment that carried the scent of cocoa and relief, a father would lift a saucepan and let it sing for a boy who had learned that the loudest safety is the quiet kind. Tomorrow, there would be another kind of room to build one with soft chairs and shelves that held more than books. But for now, what remained between them was real enough to live without a headline. Evening clung to the city with a hush like someone dimming a stage light one notch at a time. Neon signs pulsed across wet pavement, and the scent of roasted peanuts drifted from a cart near the subway steps. Dean walked home with Ethan's hand in his, the boy swinging a paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon. At their apartment, laughter rose before the door was even locked. Ethan darted to the table, spilling his backpack's contents like a river of worksheets and robot sketches. Dad, look. Mrs. Pierce wrote, excellent, on my story. She said my robot had the best ending. Dean ruffled his hair. Robots with heart compartments, remember, that's your secret weapon. Ethan grinned, then leaned in close, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And guess what? Nobody mentioned the flyers today. Not even the mean kids. It's like they disappeared. Dean's chest eased, though he didn't say it. That's how it should be, bud. Just you and your stories. Later, as Ethan slept, Dean stepped onto the balcony, city lights blinking like restless stars. He exhaled into the cool air. For weeks, he'd carried a dread heavier than his tool belt. But tonight the weight was lighter. Juliana had stood with him more than that she had shifted the ground so his son's name could rest safe. Across town, Juliana's penthouse glowed like a lantern. She stood barefoot in her kitchen, a glass of water in hand, staring at the skyline. Her phone buzzed with a dozen missed calls and congratulatory messages. She ignored them all. Instead, she scrolled to Dean's name and hovered over the call button. Her thumb lingered, but she let the screen go dark. The timing wasn't right. Not yet. The next day brought fallout. Vale's name filled headlines, but not the way he intended. Words like investigation board, censure, and ethics breach wrapped around him like chains. His smug grin vanished from the financial pages, replaced with a photo where the camera had caught him mid-blink, unguarded, suddenly small. At Heartline headquarters, a quiet shift had begun. Employees who once whispered about Juliana now greeted her with nods of respect. Some even smiled, tentative but real. In the cafeteria, conversations hushed when she walked in, not out of fear but reverence. The CEO, who once seemed distant, had stood in front of cameras and apologized to a janitor and his son. That gesture traveled faster than Vale's lies ever could. Maya noticed it most. She caught employees lingering near the new quiet room on the 11th floor, a space already softened with armchairs, a kettle, and a stack of children's books someone had donated. "It's working," Maya said one morning, handing Juliana her coffee. "You changed the culture with a single door." Juliana shook her head. "Dean did. I just signed the form." That evening, as Dean locked up his cart and swept the last crumbs from the marble floor, Juliana appeared at the far end of the hall. No cameras, no press, just her holding 2 takeout bags. "You worked through dinner again," she said. "Thought you could use real food instead of vending machine peanuts." Dean chuckled. "You spying on me now?" Maybe she teased, then added softly, "Maybe I just wanted to see you without microphones between us." They sat in the empty cafeteria sharing noodles and stories. For the first time, their laughter wasn't edged with tension. Juliana leaned back, chopsticks poised midair. "Do you remember the first night when I asked you to pretend I thought I was buying 10 minutes of protection? I didn't realize." Her voice trailed. Dean watched her steady. "Didn't realize what?" "That pretending would feel more real than anything else I'd had in years." Silence folded between them, not heavy, but delicate like a page waiting for the next line. Dean set his chopsticks down. "Juliana, I'm just a guy trying to raise his boy. I don't fit into your world of glass towers and boardrooms." She reached across the table, fingertips brushing his hand. "Maybe my world's been missing the one thing yours has plenty of honesty." Dean didn't pull away. He didn't lean in either. He let the moment breathe because some truths needed time to take root. From the doorway, a janitor pushed a mop bucket, gave them a knowing smile, and disappeared without a word. Back home, Dean tucked Ethan into bed. The boy's stirred eyes half open. "Dad, is Miss Juliana going to come for cinnamon too?" Dean kissed his forehead. "Maybe one day, kiddo." And in the quiet that followed, he allowed himself for the first time to believe that maybe wasn't just a dream. Maybe was a promise. Friday dawned with a pale sky, the city still damp from a night of rain. Dean woke early, brewed coffee in the dented pot, and watched sunlight creep over the rooftops. Something inside him had shifted. For weeks he had braced against storms, Vale's venom, the board's suspicion, the whispers at school. But now for the first time there was space for stillness. He drove Ethan to school, the boy chattering about a robot comic he wanted to write. "Dad, the hero's name is Bolt. He saves people not with fists, but with gears that heal." Dean chuckled. "Sounds familiar? Just make sure Bolt gets a day off sometimes." When Ethan disappeared into the classroom, Dean lingered by the gate, catching a glimpse of other parents nodding his way. Not cold nods, respectful. Some even smiled. He exhaled long and slow. At Heartline headquarters, Juliana strode through the lobby in a cream coat, heels clicking steady against the marble. People looked up from their laptops, some even clapped quietly. She lifted her chin, offering nothing more than a polite nod, but inside her chest swelled. Respect earned in blood and truth was heavier, but it was real. Maya cornered her in the elevator. The board wants a closed-door session. Vale's vote is gone. They're split on who should fill his seat. Let them split, Juliana said calmly. I'm done patching fractures to please them. From here on, we build new stone. By mid-afternoon, she slipped away her driver, dropping her near a quiet park not far from Ethan's school. She found Dean seated on a bench, still in his janitor's uniform, hands dusted faintly with chalk from repairing the classroom blackboard. You know you're allowed to sit without fixing something first, right? She teased. He smirked. Old habits. Besides broken things, find me. Her gaze softened. Not all broken things need fixing. Some just need company. They walked slowly along the park's path, autumn leaves skittering at their feet. Juliana spoke first. The truth is, I didn't just ask you to pretend that night to silence Vale. I asked because I was afraid. Afraid I'd walk into that gala alone and everyone would see through the armor. You gave me more than cover. You gave me breath. Dean stopped looking at her. And you gave me something Ethan hadn't seen in years. A reason to believe people like us matter, even in glass towers. They fell quiet, their steps in rhythm, their breaths forming clouds in the chill. That evening, Juliana joined them at the apartment again. She brought a pie burnt crust, but Ethan declared it the best ever. They ate at the rickety table, laughter cutting through the peeling wallpaper like sunlight. Midway through dinner, Juliana glanced at Ethan, then at Dean. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't asked you that favor? Dean wiped his mouth with a napkin. I try not to waste time on maybes, but I know my life would be a little quieter, and maybe a lot emptier. Ethan piped up, cheeks smeared with pie. And I wouldn't have cinnamon nights. They laughed. But beneath the laughter, Juliana's hand brushed Dean's. It lingered. He didn't pull away. Later, after Ethan fell asleep, Dean walked Juliana to her car. The street was quiet, the hum of the city softened. She leaned against the door, eyes bright but cautious. You know, she said, people will keep talking. Maybe not Vale anymore, but others. They'll say I don't belong beside a janitor, that you don't belong beside a CEO. Dean's voice was low, steady. Let them talk. We know what's real. Her breath caught. And what's real, Dean? He didn't answer with words. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered just long enough for her to close her eyes. But before the moment could settle, a sound split the air, the ring of Dean's phone. He stepped back, answering quickly. It was the school. Juliana watched his face tighten as he listened. What is it? She asked when he hung up. Dean's jaw clenched. They want me to come in tomorrow morning. Something about Ethan's story project. They didn't explain. For the first time in days, unease returned. The storm wasn't over. It was circling back, quieter but sharper. Saturday morning carried a brittle silence, the kind that made every sound, footsteps on tile, the whistle of the kettle, feel too sharp. Dean dressed Ethan in his warm hoodie, packing a snack even though the school hadn't asked for one. The boy bounced around, clutching his folder of robot drawings. Dad, do you think Mrs. Pierce will like Bolt's ending? Dean forced a smile. She'll love it, bud. Just be yourself. At the school office, a secretary led them into a small room. Inside sat the principal, Mrs. Pierce, and a man Dean had never seen before, sharp suit. Gold watch, a smile stretched too thin. He introduced himself as a special consultant for the district. Dean felt the hair rise on his neck. Mr. Harris, the principal, began carefully. We received concerns about Ethan's project. It was flagged. Ethan frowned. Flagged? I just drew robots. The consultant leaned forward, fingers laced. The concern isn't about robots, son. It's about the themes. Stories of broken systems, corrupt leaders, and ordinary people standing up. Some parents believe it's inappropriate for a child his age. Dean's voice sharpened. So you're censoring his imagination now? The man didn't flinch. We're saying this narrative sounds coached, as if someone planted ideas. His gaze flicked to Dean. Ideas not suitable for a child. Dean's jaw clenched. He wanted to lunge across the table, but Ethan's small hand gripped his sleeve. Dad, the boy whispered. Juliana's voice cut the tension. She had arrived quietly, slipping into the room without announcement. If you're accusing anyone of planting ideas, accuse me. All heads turned. She set her leather bag on the table with a thud. Because I told Ethan stories. Stories about courage, about honesty, about men like his father who don't wear suits but carry the real weight of this city. The consultant shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Vale. Ms. Hart, she corrected coldly. And if you're implying Dean Harris isn't fit to guide his son, you'll answer not just to me but to every camera I invite into this school by noon. The principal raised her hands. Please, no one is accusing. Juliana leaned forward, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Don't mistake fear of headlines for mercy. Ethan's voice matters, and if you silence him, you silence every child who dares to write truth into fiction. The room froze. Finally, the consultant muttered something about reviewing policy and left. Ethan beamed at Juliana. Miss Juliana, you sounded like Bolt. Her expression softened. Maybe Bolt sounds like you, Ethan. As they left the school, Dean walked beside her, his steps heavy, but his heart lighter. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did, Juliana replied simply. Because this isn't just about you anymore. Or me. It's about Ethan and what he learns from watching us. That evening, they gathered again in Dean's small kitchen. The scent of chili filled the air, steam fogging the window panes. Ethan colored at the table while Juliana stirred the pot. Dean leaned against the counter watching her. You keep showing up, Juliana. Even when the fight's not yours. She glanced over her shoulder. Maybe that's what family does. The word lingered. Family. Dean's throat tightened. For so long, it had been just him and Ethan against the world. Now, the edges were shifting. Later, after Ethan drifted off to sleep, Juliana stayed behind. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the hum of the radiator. She sat on the worn couch, hands folded, eyes distant. Dean lowered himself beside her. You okay? She nodded slowly. For years, my life has been contracts, mergers, numbers. Everything polished, controlled. But tonight, in this little kitchen with chili bubbling, it felt like home. Something I didn't know I was missing. Dean's chest ached. He wanted to reach for her to erase the distance that had lived between them since that night at the gala. But before he could, she turned her hand, brushing his cheek. I asked you to pretend, Dean, she whispered. And now, I don't know if I can tell where pretending ends and real begins. The air between them crackled. Dean leaned closer, his voice rough. Then maybe we stop pretending. Their lips met, not with fireworks, but with a quiet certainty that felt stronger than any storm. For the first time, Dean Harris wasn't just a janitor or a veteran or a single dad holding the line. He was a man choosing something for himself. And Juliana Hart, once the untouchable CEO, chose him back. Sunday arrived with a soft shine, the kind of morning that makes a city look newly forgiven. The Indie Cafe's chalkboard wore careful handwriting, community reading hour 9:00 a.m. Someone had sketched a little coffee cup whose steam curled like music notes. Inside light fell across oak tables and a neat row of mismatched mugs. Dean Walker adjusted the open sign with the gravity of a tiny ceremony. Juliana Cross straightened a stack of paper cups, then smoothed the paper stage Dean had taped on the floor, a small square where big voices could stand. Neighbors drifted in as if answering a bell only they could hear, night shift custodians still in their sneakers, a nurse with purple tape on her wrist, the retired pianist from the Heartline lobby clutching a folded handkerchief, two teachers with Saturday faces, Nora from the kitchen wiping her hands on her apron as if she was about to applaud. Maya slipped through the door, last tablet tucked away on purpose. Ethan popped up onto the little wooden step Dean had sanded smooth until it felt like kindness. His hair was combed to the idea of order. He held stapled pages with the title written in pencil like a promise the strongest cup. Juliana leaned to Dean. You ready? She whispered. He smiled small and certain. Been ready for this since the day he learned once upon a time. The room quieted until you could hear the hiss of milk finding its song. Ethan cleared his throat. My story is about a guy who thinks he just cleans up spills. He began voice thin but brave and a girl who builds castles and negotiates for better sidewalks. A ripple of laughter, careful not to spook the courage. It's about how they learned hot cocoa is just a drink that holds a family together. He read of a night when rain tried to be lightning, of a coffee tray that became a shield, of a heel that broke, and hands that fixed it with tape, and a pin, because value is whether it holds when it matters. He read of a boy who gave a robot a heart compartment, so the good things had somewhere to live when the noise got loud. He read of a woman who said no to a bully in a room that echoed, and a man who said yes to telling the truth when telling the truth could sting. Midway through, Ethan looked up as if to check the room hadn't fallen away. It hadn't. It leaned in. Dean's hand found the back of a chair and stilled there like a person remembering to breathe. Juliana's fingers rested on the counter knuckles, pale then warm again. The strongest cup, Ethan read, voice steadier now, isn't the one that never spills. It's the one you refill together. When he finished, the silence didn't break so much as blossom. The old pianist clapped first one gentle beat, then another. The room followed soft, then full. Dean scooped his son into a hug so fierce the cafe looked away and smiled at its shoes. Juliana reached for the pages as if they were fragile glass. "You wrote this," she said softly. "And you let it walk." Ethan nodded, serious. "Miss Pierce said stories are like bridges. You have to trust them. Nora passed cocoa like metals that don't need a ceremony. Maya found a corner of counter and pretended to reorganize napkins, blinking hard. When she caught Juliana's eye, she gave a nod that said later, and good news, and we did it all at once. Updates, Juliana murmured when the room turned to soft chatter. Ethics committees at 2 funds voted censure, Maya said, voice low. A third suspended Conrad pending a full review. And the quiet room rollout is set, every building by summer. Procurement already ordered the chairs you liked. Also, she paused, letting the sentence find its true shape. The scholarship portal opened at dawn. First applications are in. Children of night shift workers, anonymized as promised. Juliana didn't smile. Something in her eased deeper than smile. "Good," she said. "Let the paperwork teach." Dean set 3 humble cups of cocoa on the counter, steam rising in unambitious halos. "To authors," he said. "To quiet rooms in loud cities," Juliana answered, tapping her cup to theirs. Ethan clinked, last solemn as a judge. People lingered. The nurse showed Ethan how to fold a paper heart for his robot. The pianist promised to bring a song next week that didn't rush anybody. A custodian with road salt on his cuffs pointed at the chalkboard. "Haven't seen a room do this much good with this little noise," he said to no one in particular. When the neighbors filtered out into the forgiving light, the cafe settled into the comfortable after silence of a job done right. Dean wiped down the counter without needing to. Juliana set the story pages beneath the tip jar like a talisman. Ethan perched on his wooden step, swinging his legs, a boy who had just found out his voice could hold a room. "Walk," Dean asked, glancing at the window where the day had turned honest. They stepped into a street that smelled of wet brick and the kind of bakeries that know your name. The city moved at a humane tempo. No flashes, no vans with tinted windows, just dog leashes, stroller wheels, a bus sighing like a tired uncle. Ethan took the middle because that's where kids belong. Fingers twined with each of theirs, swinging their arms like a metronome that had finally found the right tempo. Dad Ethan said, eyes on the tiny parade of ants rethinking a crack in the sidewalk. "Are we a unit?" Dean glanced at Juliana, then down at the small hand in his. "We're a family," he said. "We'll decide the vocabulary as we go." Juliana laughed softly. "CFOs love vocabulary." Then, more serious, "We choose ours." They passed a storefront where a muted television scrolled old footage of Conrad Vale stepping into an elevator, a Chiron muttering words like investigation and suspension. No one inside looked up. The world had moved on to more useful weather. A woman from Heartline's night crew waved shyly from a bus stop, then held up her phone, the scholarship portal open to a form that asked practical questions in plain language. Dean waved back with a smile that could steady a kite. Juliana lifted 2 fingers in a small salute and kept walking, because not all gratitude wants a spotlight. At the park, a breeze sorted the leaves into piles that didn't ask for permission. Ethan ran ahead to the low stone wall and balanced along it like a tightrope artist with a very sensible safety net. About yesterday, Juliana set eyes on the boy she had chosen to stand beside before she had chosen the man. I meant it. I won't let anyone turn his imagination into evidence. Dean nodded. You sounded like Bolt, he said. But I know it wasn't pretending. They stood in the kind of quiet that fixes more than it breaks. After a while, Dean spoke again, not looking at her, because sometimes the truest things prefer the sight of the eye. If this is the sequel, he said, let's write it because we're still here, not because a room clapped. Juliana turned to him. I choose you, she said, not because we won a round, because the quiet chose us back. A song drifted from somewhere. A window cracked open, a radio that trusted its own volume. Dean offered his hand, almost embarrassed, like a man who knows better than to stage grand gestures but sometimes forgets to stop wanting them. Dance with me, Juliana said, saving him from deciding alone, if the sidewalk doesn't mind. They moved small, respectful of pedestrians and their own history. The coffee tray that had once been a shield, the taped heel, the boardroom with its polished dangers, the kitchen where Coco learned to sing on cue, the school office where a consultant forgot what stories are for. Dean led like a person who'd memorized every creak in an old house. Juliana followed like someone who had traded armor for a dress you can breathe in. No one clapped. The city wouldn't dare. They walked home by the long way on purpose. At the cafe door, Juliana paused, touching the frame like blessing more than wood. Tonight, she asked. Cinnamon, always Dean said. Inside, he set 3 mugs on the counter with the care of placing medals that don't need names. Ethan climbed onto a stool and announced that the robot's heart compartment now had a hinge that would never jam. Because sometimes you don't force it, he explained to an audience that couldn't get enough of him. You make it so it can open and close without breaking. Dean caught Juliana's eye. She didn't say I love you. That sentence has its own weather and shows up when it wants. What she said was this: we keep our promises where the cameras aren't. He nodded, feeling the truth take its seat and unbutton its coat. Outside, the day softened toward evening. Inside, steam rose and made halos of nothing in particular. The story didn't need a drum roll. It needed a table, 3 cups, and a room that knew the difference between quiet and silence. Sometimes the strongest cup isn't the one on the counter. Sometimes it's the life that holds refilled after storms, handed from one set of steady hands to another, warm enough to share, ordinary enough to last. Your thoughts will help us create meaningful stories. And if you want to hear more powerful healing stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon so you don't miss any new episodes. And most importantly, share this video with people who need a little hope today. Thank you so much for your time. We hear you, we listen to you, and we are honored to tell these stories for you.